Hello and welcome back to another weekly video lesson. My name is Annie. I'm one of the registered dietitians here with the KU Weight Management Program, and I'm so happy to be here again with you today. We are going to walk through the intuitive eating lesson today. So just as a reminder, these are just kind of a brief 10-minute overview of the main points of the lesson, and we will go ahead and jump right in. Today we are going to cover what exactly is the concept of intuitive eating. It is kind of a more nuanced approach, I would say. So we'll just cover the basics of what is the intuitive eating approach, why maybe it might be beneficial for you to try to implement that into your kind of health plan, and then how exactly to use the concepts of intuitive eating and to help that assist in your health journey. So that's what we're going to cover today. Let's go ahead and get started. So what exactly is intuitive eating? Intuitive eating is a set of 10 principles and really just kind of an overall approach to healthy eating and food in general that is meant to help us understand kind of a better internal connection of the mind, the body, and food. It's an approach developed by two dietitians in the 90s, but it's definitely become a little bit more popular. Maybe people are more intrigued by it in recent years, I would say. And it can be a really helpful approach to help us understand our internal hunger cues instead of relying on external cues to guide us in meal timing and food choices. Over the years, we kind of learn external factors that dictate when we're eating and why we're eating. For example, we see it's 5 o'clock and we think it's dinner time. That's a small example, but instead of relying on those external cues, intuitive eating helps us kind of come back to those internal hunger cues and a better mind-body connection to help guide us when we are trying to choose food choices and understand eating in general. So why might you want to use intuitive eating as a part of your care plan or healthy eating plan? One good reason why I think this approach is helpful is because it really helps us be more in tune with our physical hunger, and it really helps us distinguish between that physical hunger and maybe what we might see as emotional hunger. So the principles with intuitive eating really help us and guide us to eat when we're hungry and try not to eat for other reasons, whether we're bored or stressed or feeling emotional or coping in some way. So it can be a really helpful approach to be better about knowing what our physical hunger is and eating in tune with that. It's also a positive approach for individuals who have almost felt overwhelmed by mixed messages or a bunch of different food rules over the years to where they get to a point where they don't know even how to eat anymore. It feels overwhelming to them to make a healthy food choice and to plan meals because they feel like they've either tried a ton of different diets or heard a bunch of different food rules that might be conflicting with each other, and compare and add that to the fact that we have all these external triggers to eat, whether that's seeing a fast food sign or, like I said, just seeing the clock. Pair all that together and you get an individual who doesn't really know what direction to turn in terms of healthy eating. So intuitive eating can be kind of a helpful compass for that individual to come back to their intuition in terms of when they should eat, when they should stop eating, and give some principles for them to follow to help them kind of get back on track on what does healthy eating look like for them. Additionally, intuitive eating can be helpful because it's an approach that kind of carries the mantra that you are not what you eat. For example, intuitive eating kind of helps us understand that just because we might have made a food choice that is higher in calories or lower in nutrients, that we are not bad or morally wrong for making that food choice, but rather we see food as kind of through a neutral lens, if you will. So we see some foods as more nutrient dense, maybe lower in calories, and we see some foods as higher in calories, lower in nutrients. And of course, some food choices are going to make us feel better than others. Some food choices are going to support our goals better than others, but we do not associate guilt or feeling like we are bad, maybe for choosing higher calorie or lower nutrient foods. So I think intuitive eating, like I said, can be a really positive part of your healthy eating plan, because it can feel like kind of a more positive driver for healthy eating. You might feel more accepted by using this approach, and it really helps us tune into our internal hunger cues in maybe a more positive approach, which I think is awesome. So now that we've talked about what exactly intuitive eating is and why you might want to explore it a little bit more, or even take that step to add some of the principles to your kind of plan or your health goals, I want to talk about a little bit how you could get started with intuitive eating. So first and foremost, one good tool or piece that you could start using in your daily life is imagining a hunger scale before you sit down to any meal or snack. Really, before you reach for any food, I want you to imagine a hunger scale that ranges from 1 to 10. So 1 is ravenous. Maybe you skipped breakfast, you skipped lunch, and we get to the end of the day, we've survived on coffee, and we're starving. You have a headache, your stomach is growling, you might feel, like it's hard to focus. So 1 is ravenous, 10 is stuffed. 10 is you went to an Italian restaurant and ate a lot of bread, a lot of pasta, maybe some drinks, and you feel like you need to just go lay down on the couch, at the point of discomfort in terms of fullness. So we want to avoid those extremes, and that's a really good first step to eating more intuitively, is paying attention and being more mindful of when you're in the middle of that scale. So maybe you're at the point in the middle of your workday where you take a pause and think, I could be hungry. I'm feeling like there could be some signs of hunger there. Maybe my stomach is rumbling just a little bit. I'm not to the point where I'm ravenous and need something immediately, but I'm coming around to the fact that I might need to eat soon. At that point, we want to start the meal, because you're still in control. You're still at the point where you can make a healthy food choice and eat a reasonable portion, and we're not ravenous. And then on the contrast of that, we want you to check in while you're eating, so you can stop the meal, stop eating before you are to the point where you are uncomfortably stuffed. So at different checkpoints throughout the meal, maybe you set your fork down, take a sip of water. You could think, even if I still have food on my plate, where am I at in terms of this hunger and fullness scale? Could I stop eating now and be satisfied? And have that be kind of a cue to push your plate away, maybe take your last bite, and always know that you can always come back for more later, but it's better to evaluate and stop eating before you're too full. And also remembering, just as a second rule of thumb, you do not have to clean your plate. So I know that's kind of a common thing that I'll hear from clients or patients, where they just were raised to clean their plate, and that's just a habit at this point. Well, checking in kind of with your fullness throughout the meal can help you understand, okay, even though I still have food on my plate, I'm really not hungry anymore. I'm going to wrap this up and save it, for another time. So use that hunger and fullness scale. Try to start a meal and end a meal in the middle instead of being ravenous or super, super stuffed. And also remember that you don't have to be a part of the clean plate club by any means. Now, another thing that you can do to kind of start practicing being more intuitive is minimize distractions when you're eating. So it's often that we might eat in front of our laptop at work, or maybe we eat in front of the TV at home. Those are very common things, but just as an experiment, try to sit down at the table with no distractions, no phone, no book, just you sitting down with the meal, and maybe loved ones sitting down with you to eat. But this will help you just be more mindful in general at meal times. It'll help make it more clear when you're starting to get full, and you can eat a little bit slower. And you can really pay attention to how the meal is going. Are you feeling satisfied with what you're eating? Are you enjoying it? Sometimes when we sit down to a meal, that kind of fork to mouth motion is almost subconscious. So we're not even thinking about, are we enjoying this? Are we getting full? How fast are we eating? Are we chewing our food? We've just become accustomed to eating very quickly. So we want to slow down, we want to be really mindful, and even make it an experience if you have to. Kind of your mental, how you feel about the meal and how satisfied you are with the meal can really be a game changer. So paying attention to, am I even enjoying this like I thought I would? And if you're not enjoying it, feeling okay with pushing it to the side and either trying something else or ending the meal altogether. So really just practicing mindfulness and minimizing distractions at meal times can also be a really good tool in addition to kind of using that hunger and fullness scale. Now, in addition to those skills, I also wanted to finish with one way you can get started with intuitive eating is really eating according to those internal cues, those small signals that you might be hungry, instead of eating to external cues. So like I kind of touched on earlier, it's common for at a social event or a work meeting, if you see food in front of you, you might just reach for it because you see it and you might smell it, and that's your external cue to grab something to eat it. Or like I said with the clock example, if we see that it's noon or we see that it's 5 o'clock, we might just think, oh, it's time for me to have a meal, even though we're not really hungry and we're not really paying attention to our hunger and fullness cues there. So like I said in the very beginning, before you reach for a snack or a meal of any kind, really try to be mindful of, am I just reaching for this food out of habit? Am I just reaching for this food because of external cues? Or do I truly feel like I'm hungry and am ready to have a meal? So back to kind of the original definition of intuitive eating, really become in tune with physical hunger and try your best to not be eating due to external cues or even emotional cravings. So those are kind of some tools to help you get started. I want to leave you with a challenge today. So in the binder, in the intuitive eating chapter, there is the 10 principles listed there. So I encourage you to go look at those 10 principles. Those are pretty much the foundation for intuitive eating, in addition to the concepts we covered today. And then there's also a mindful eating activity that it kind of gives you the steps and guides you through in the binder as well. So I encourage you to take a look at those 2 items. And otherwise, I'm just so happy that you were here today watching this video, and I will see you next time.